Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video, and it is time for another long form discussion with a guest that's returning. And the interesting thing about this guest was I had him on just at the start of lockdown, which in ways doesn't feel that long ago, but does feel that long ago now that football has nearly returned. And bring him back on for a discussion not only about recent Chelsea news, but of course the Premier League restart and Chelsea getting back on the pitch, playing some Premier League football and seeing how that will work out. But welcome back, Louis Beneventi. I'm sure everyone knows who this guy is. The OG, an OG of Chelsea football YouTube, now the owner of the Chelsea Echo. So Chelsea Echo, I'll leave the link in the description box below, and he'll shout out later in the video, is where you can find all of his work. But Louis, how have you been? How have you found the last 27,000 weeks?
I've been good, mate. It's how do I say it politely? That is me saying it politely. I found it good. In reality, I've been like looking at the walls, just kind of going, right, okay, what am I going to do in my time? And obviously, I thought, do you know what? I'll have an early midlife crisis and improve my content. So, which I haven't uploaded for months, by the way. Probably should start doing that. But it's one of those where it's like, got some new gear, got this. I called him Derek. But outside of that, it's one of those where it's like, you know, I'm doing, I'm doing good, basically.
Yeah,
I'm
good to
getting
hear,
better.
man. I think the weather's now improving, so I think maybe in
Mm.
some ways people's moods are being lifted. I mean, it feels very weird that sort of April and May did happen, but it doesn't feel like it happened. It was just sort of like, well, we've lost April and May this year, but hopefully, if things improve, we'll get some sort of summer, and then
Mm.
things will improve and get back to some sort of normality. But Chelsea news, I saw you did a discussion on your channel, which as well, another link in the description box below, with Yannick Football Therapy, and you had a long form discussion with him about
Hmm.
Chelsea transfer news, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Ben Chilwell, and I want to sort of ask you some of those questions as well, because Timo Werner instantly, let's talk about him, because there's a lot of frustration because it hasn't been announced yet, but it does. Everyone you want to be saying that Timo Werner is going to Chelsea has been saying that,
Mm.
because it came out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, for weeks we've heard that clubs ain't going to be able to spend that much this summer. Don't expect anything big. Don't expect marquee signings. And then within hours, Chelsea had agreed to sign Timo Werner. Were you as shocked as I was?
Oh yeah. I think if anyone turns around and say we're going to sign Timo Werner, I would have laughed at him a few months ago. But the fact that I think is one of those where he looked so set on going to Liverpool that I kind of just mentally took a back seat and went, right, okay, right, it's not going to happen. We'll leave it. We'll try and find another target. I mean, was it one of the positions where we needed to definitely massively strengthen? I was like, oh, doing what I normally do, which was kind of, condensing in a box, putting it back on, going, it's fine. We'll sign a left back. We'll do this. We'll do that. And then out of nowhere, it goes, yeah, Chelsea's signing Timo Werner, and I was still until yesterday, even though we'd agreed a fee, I was still there going, worrying about a hijack. I was there going, right, Liverpool might come in here. Liverpool might come in. I'm not going to say anything yet. Just relax, relax, relax. Um, and obviously Liverpool haven't come in. He looks pretty much set to put pen to paper. And then Romano yesterday went, he did the here we go. So I'm kind of there like, right, it's done, fantastic. So that's coming through the door. Massive asset up front, fantastic for rotation, fantastic to even play with Tammy Abraham if we decide to play a two. He can play out wide, obviously, ideally, even though, like Yannick was saying on my discussion the other day, he is a converted winger. He's still somebody who can play out there. And it just offers us so many options in that front line as well. Even if you want to play a diamond in midfield, potentially, it gives options for even like Hakim Ziyech to go into the 10, for example, who's another player we've signed. And then obviously there's all the talk of, Ben Chilwell, Tagliafico. One thing I'm quite surprised about is that there hasn't been much talk about a centre back. And I think that's something which we have really needed to strengthen as a club. But I mean, like Timo Werner arriving, it's just when he does come, I'm excited to see what he'll do to the Premier League, because one of those for me was I'm always worried a player's going to come and do horrendously. Always worried about that. But when you see players coming in from the Bundesliga, mentally, I'm trying to go back and I can't really think of any players off the top of my head. And, please tell me if I'm wrong in the comment section. Over the past 5 or 6 years that have come in from the Bundesliga and have done horrendously at the top level. Um, Obviously, Aubameyang hit the ground running, and that's probably the blueprint which some Chelsea fans are looking at. But it's one of those where you're getting a striker. I mean, Julian Nagelsmann said yesterday after the game, they said, how are you looking at replacing Timo Werner? He straight up just said, look, like we cannot replace Timo Werner. You're trying to replace 34 goals a season. So to have signed that level player as someone who is considered indispensable for that price, Chelsea have done a fantastic job here. And it's going to be a really exciting time to see him in blue when he comes.
Whenever that is. I mean, we don't really know the gap between the first, like this season when it finishes, and then the next season whenever that starts. But I agree with everything you said. I think the flexibility and versatility now Frank Lampard has, and everything you've heard, I found what was more interesting and enlightening and exciting for me was the role Petr Cech had in the transfer. I think that really excited me because it started to make me feel like all those frustrations we'd had in previous years with Conte and Sarri about feeling there wasn't maybe a connection between the head coach and the sense of unity within Chelsea has started to creep in under Lampard, and that joined up thinking. And maybe Petr Cech's role is more like a director of football than we thought, even though, of course, he hasn't been given that role. And Liam Toomey's done some great reporting on this, saying that's not really his role. But really, he had a strong hand in this transfer with him and Lampard flying over to Germany pre-lockdown to have a discussion with Timo Werner. How would you play it? If you next season, what do you think? Because of course Tammy has done brilliantly this season, and he could still reach 20 goals when the Premier League restarts. Because of course he's fit now, and you assume Frank Lampard will give him minutes. How would you play him? Because I think it would be a little bit harsh if Tammy was to reach say 20 goals or stick at 15, 16, 17. I think that'd be a brilliant return for him this season to just say, that's it now, we discard you. I think that's what makes Werner such an exciting prospect, isn't it? That you could play those two together. So would you do that?
I mean, yes and no. I think I was having a discussion. I mean, you remember Matt from when you came to watch the PSG game down here. Me and him were having a chat about it, and we were talking about, Tammy Abraham. I would play them together, but he, for example, wasn't so convinced. He thinks, maybe having that pace in attack rather than hold up play could be pivotal in some games. Personally, for me, I would love to play a 4-1-2-1-2 narrow diamond because we have a lot of central midfielders, but then doing that, it cuts out, the wingers we're signing. It's Hakim Ziyech, like I said, he can play as a 10, but then, do you want to play him as 10 or do you want to have him cutting in from the right-hand side? You've got Christian Pulisic as well, who's another player that would feel really hard done by if you were to play that formation. But it's one of those where it's really difficult for Frank now because this season it was a lot easier for him because you had the youth players being integrated into an already existing squad, kind of like you would have at most clubs. Very simple, just developing the youth, getting the squad moving, getting a good balance there. And that's the problem. It's the balance where he's now signing players which could, drastically affect the balance of the team, but with that improves the team. I mean, there was obviously images, people might have been putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5, but obviously as soon as Timo Werner's come through the door, there's images of Frank Lampard and Tammy Abraham having what looked like a very heated discussion on the training pitch. And it's one of those where he's probably feeling very hard done by because he feels he's done a good job. But for us to challenge, I'm not saying we're going to challenge for a title next year, but for us to, develop the squad, like Frank's saying, with that 3-year plan, develop the youth, bring in the talent, go for it. I think that we did have to consider signing that ready-made centre forward who could work with Tammy. But it's one of those where, like I'm saying, you could play them together in that too. You could play him as a left winger who comes inside as almost like an inside forward when we're on the attack. And, if this is where we're talking about the left back again as well. You have someone coming in there, pushing forward and bombing forward and flanking on the right left-hand side. But it's one of those where I don't think you can not play them together. I personally think that Tammy Abraham's an asset in terms of you can see that he's developed a lot this year. Mentally, he's a very strong player. He can hold up the ball amazingly well if he's given the opportunity. He still needs to work on it, but he can do it. He's only going to get better at it as well. Um, and it's in terms of the balance and culture of the club. You now have players and the likes of Tammy Abraham, Fikayo Tomori, just examples of two, Reece James, Mason Mount, as players that understand the culture of the club. And I think that's a massive thing if you want to be successful. Um, and I think, look, for me, I would play them together, but a lot of people will probably say drop Tammy Abraham because I feel he's not had the best season. But for a guy who's had had a very broken season because of, what do we call him when we were on the first call? Kenneth. Because of Kenneth, lockdown. He has delivered above expectations. And that screams for me someone who deserves to be given opportunities to play at the highest level. And the beauty of it, with him being only 21, is he's only going to get better. So, I think Timo Werner is going to bring out something different that you've not seen in Tammy, because you've got those options left wing. We had Christian Pulisic, who, plays out there, and he's had a great season, don't get me wrong, but he is more of a ball carrier, a deliverer of the ball, more than a goal scorer. And Timo Werner can carry the ball. He can assist, but more importantly, he offers that deadly finish if you give him the space. And I think that that's going to be something that's absolutely massive and will only improve Tammy's confidence and his abilities. Maybe not as a ball player consistently, and maybe not as a goal scorer, but almost could be fulfilling what a Giroud-esque role could be, where he holds the ball up, he brings others into play, and it's stuff like that where like I said earlier, we have so many options.
I think that those options, and I think for me, when I'm looking at like the best elements of Chelsea this season, it's always been with pace. It's always been with players moving, interchanging positions, with that dynamic movement that I think Frank wants. He talks so much about pace and moving the ball as quickly as possible from one end of the pitch to the other. It's a very simplistic thing, but I think it's what he wants. He wants Chelsea's possession in terms of from Sarri, possession stats in terms of from Sarri to Lampard haven't decreased that much, but a little bit. There's a sense that we are playing a little bit more direct under Lampard. And I think that I agree with you. I think that's the thing that I think Tammy can contribute to, absolutely. And I think that hold-up play that you do need on a more physical day, because we are still going to be playing against low blocks. That's the thing Frank Lampard and Chelsea need to solve next season, because I've been speaking to other Chelsea fans about this and having discussions about Tammy and where he needs to improve. I think it's during those months for me, like August to September, October, the early months of the season. I could imagine Tammy being quite good as he was this season in banging in goals. It's November to February where the meat of the season is, and where really titles get won and lost, or where the sort of the destiny of your season lies. And Chelsea are going to struggle during those months, as every team does, but it's about having those match winners and having goals in those games against Bournemouth, West Ham, Southampton that could really crack the code. And I think, as you pointed out, with that flexibility, Tammy can hold up the ball, and I could see a bit like the relationship Poulsen and Werner have at Leipzig, Tammy and Werner could have. What that means for, say, a Christian Pulisic, who I think could be a massive player for Chelsea next season, based on almost the short sample size we've got this year, because I think he's been one of Chelsea's best performers, but we haven't seen a lot of him. What that means for him, but it's all about, the great thing about Chelsea is it's still uncertain under Lampard, isn't it? We don't know what the best team is, and there's a lot to be discovered, not only next season, but in the remaining 10 games. I would just want to move on about Ben Chilwell, some of the other big targets. Ben Chilwell, I see there's a lot of mixed opinion about Ben Chilwell. Yeah. I have to admit, I've always been of the mind that I think that not only because of his age, because of the experience he has in the Premier League, I've never I'd say Grimado, but that's only based on numbers and, the performance level of him. But to me, I think in terms of his Premier League experience, I think that's brilliant. I've never really sniffed at Ben Chilwell. My only issue has been that price, which if it rises to 80 million, I'm like, Tagliafico, mate. That's probably a better option. What are your take on Chilwell?
Well, having read some different things this morning, and especially with what's going on, I don't think Leicester will go for that 80 million price tag. And he wants to leave to go to Chelsea. So they're not going to hang on to a player because, much like Chelsea are currently, they're a club that relies heavily on balance, relies on a good aura around the club. They're not going to want to hold on to a player that doesn't want to be there. So for us, I guess thumbs up, fantastic. I would pay a world record fee for Ben Chilwell. And I know there's already going to be people in the comment section saying I'm absolutely mental. But, I mean, Dan's known me for what, 5 years now? So, yeah, I am a bit mental. So we'll address that quickly. Ben Chilwell, like you've already said, understands the league, understands, the players, understands what he needs to do in that role in the Premier League. And on top of that as well, last season, I don't think anybody would have sniffed at Ben Chilwell. No, he's not had the best of seasons, but he's still a solid player. Very solid. And when people say, would you pay a world record fee for just a solid player? Absolutely not. But what you're paying for with Ben Chilwell is you're paying for the potential. Tagliafico is 27 years old. You're getting a player directly in their prime, but I mean, he's had a good couple of seasons at Ajax beforehand. You just know people just weren't convinced by him when he was in, higher caliber, higher quality leagues and playing at higher levels. When he played at the World Cup with Argentina, he was exposed as a massive weak point. So with that, you then need to analyze that and go, okay, cool. Alex Telles, another player people have spoken about, definitely a big fish in a small pond in Portugal, but he looks like he's going to PSG. So, okay, you move on from that. That's that sorted. Grimaldo, I agree, quality player, but you'd probably be paying £10 million less, maybe a little bit less, because we are a Premier League club and a large Premier League club at that, for somebody who doesn't understand the league and doesn't understand the qualities and doesn't understand what he needs to do, which, I would happily pay that extra 10 million for on a player who can definitely make a difference to our team. Also, let's not forget Frank Lampard and Ashley Cole are both gone. Yeah, we'll have him. I'm like, okay, cool. That's enough for me. If they're sat there going, this is what we want to improve our system, this is what we want to show what we can do, this is what we can mould. Because not going to lie, Ben Chilwell, under the right manager, in the right system, much like Andy Robertson, much like Trent Alexander-Arnold, he can do a fantastic job, which we saw last season when he was at Leicester. Under Brendan Rodgers, he started performing really well. Let's not forget as well, when people think best fullbacks in the league, left back position, Andy Robertson, definitely, probably, he is the best in the league. And then you probably think about maybe Mendy when he's fit. Who else can you talk about? There's a couple of other players as well, maybe. But in that top 5 definite bracket, you're looking at Ben Chilwell. You're also looking at England's first choice left back. So I would pay the money for Ben Chilwell. It's a risk, yeah. But when you're a club of Chelsea's stature and with the finances that we have as a club as well, you can take that risk. And I'd rather take that risk on Ben Chilwell, who can prove to be an upgrade in the left back position than Emerson, definitely. And maybe as a wing back, he might not be as good as Marcos Alonso. Marcos Alonso for me is probably one of the best wing backs out there in terms of going forward and coming and keeping shape in terms of his height and his stature. He's not a fullback, but it's one of those where it's like, okay, it's something where we need to reinforce that position. We need to have guaranteed quality. He has the quality within him. He has the levels and understanding of the Premier League. And when we were talking about balance of the squad earlier, Dan, he has that as well. He plays with Tammy Abraham. He plays with Tomori. He plays with Reece James. He plays with all of them with England. He'll walk and just, all right, Tammy, how are you? It'll be straight there. Bang, chemistry, sorted. Okay? And that's not just a FIFA term where people are like, green lines, all that crap. It's genuine human connection, which is very hard to come by pre-existing. You can just develop it like that, but that's 1 in a million. You don't get to do that with many people. If you have that within a squad of football players, that addresses the balance. If you look at the FA 4-corner model, it's a massively outdated model, yeah, but you kind of just narrow it down straight away. I did notes on it actually the other day. I wrote it. Let me find it quick. It was so when you look at it, you've got the technical, psychological, physical, and social. If you're looking at all those boxes, technically, Ben Chilwell ticks the box. England's first choice left back. Physically, ticks the box as well. He's got all the attributes you need in the left back position. Psychologically, maybe obviously hasn't performed the highest level. He's not done Champions League, but Premier League football, week in, week out, understands the league. Mentally, you have to be strong to be in that position. Does that, and socially, plays with England, does everything he needs to do. What more do you want? He understands everything. He knows how it all works. He's just got to integrate himself into Lampard's system. 80 million, yes, outrageous. 60 million, world record fee? Yeah, because that's modern football. If anyone says, we can get him for about 30, 40 million, you're mad. You're mad. You're going to a direct Premier League rival, England's first choice left back, one of the best fullbacks in the league, and he's English, so there is going to be a premium. So, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is for a player of that quality and of that stature.
Left back for me has always been my top priority position this summer. It always has been, even with, signing Werner, signing Ziyech. I've always felt it's the position that Chelsea need to strengthen the most. And I've always said, and I still maintain, even though there is that argument Matisse made when I had him on the channel last week, where he said, there's a reason why you pay more for strikers, for goal scorers, because those are the players that are going to win you games. But I think the system Lampard is building, I think a Reece James can be as important to Chelsea winning and losing games of football as a striker can be. And I think because I think that you talk about the balance and you talk about the creativity within Chelsea's team. I think in terms of, there's lots of comparisons between Chelsea maybe copying Liverpool. I think Chelsea have a better creative midfield than Liverpool do. I don't feel that Lampard will, because Liverpool's midfield can be quite functional and it functions for a reason. And Klopp's done that to help benefit that front three. And almost their midfielders are their fullbacks. So maybe Chelsea could be a little bit different in that sense, because you do think there can be that creativity from Chelsea's central midfield. But in terms of left back, for me, I agree. It's a bit like the Pulisic situation. Loads of people going, Pulisic, why are you paying 60 million for him? You're not just paying 60 million for the player who's going to perform for you in 1 month. You're paying that money in the hope, and Borussia Dortmund, that's why Borussia Dortmund asked for 60 million, because there's a sense that Pulisic could turn out to be an incredible player, and he's going to be worth a hell of a lot more than 60 million in a couple of years. And we hope that for Christian Pulisic's sake and for Chelsea's sake, 60 million looks like a bit of a bargain in a few years. And maybe with Chilwell it could be the same. And I think modern fullbacks have become so much more essential in recent years. And I think maybe there's still a bit to go in terms of people maybe upgraded their thinking, in terms of thinking left backs and fullbacks are important in the system now, and maybe there's still that sense that you can get a fullback for 10 million and it's it's fine, spend all the money on the flashy forwards, and maybe there's a sense that needs to be developed. But I agree with you. I wouldn't mind Tagliafico if Leicester are too hard negotiators. I think Tagliafico for a more short-term option, I think can work. He's got that Champions League experience. Ziyech, he knows. You talk about connection. Tagliafico knows Ziyech, so he knows a player that's already in Chelsea's squad, so there can be that connection, so he can feel more welcome at Chelsea when he arrives. But I agree with you. I think Lampard's first choice, backing your manager's first choice, I think is important. It was something that created conflict with Antonio Conte, something that created conflict with Jose Mourinho, and that's what Chelsea are doing, and I think they're going to do the same with Ben Chilwell. Lastly, before we move on to the Premier League restart and the Aston Villa game, I want to talk to you about Kai Havertz, because, of course, that is the next big sort of target, and there's so many people who want him. I guess the question I'm going to pose to you, and it's quite a simplistic one, do we need him?
Yes and no. I'll address yes first. How many times does a straight up wonder kid fall into your lap? Rarely. He is a versatile player as well. He's somebody who could be in Chelsea squad for years to come if he doesn't get snapped up by somebody else. And he offers something which we haven't had for a while, which is goals from midfield. No, because we already have 7.5 million central midfielders of very good quality. And no, because do we need, if he's not an out-and-out winger, and we've got loads of strikers. So it's one of those where you'd probably look at it and Mason Mount people might have said he's not had an amazing season, and he's not as good as people are making out to be. He's a very important player for Chelsea because he wins the ball high up the pitch, and he offers that, pre-assist creativity and stuff which you don't get anywhere else in those sort of players. Left wing, he can play out there as well. He can play as an 8, he can play as a 10. Kai Havertz can do all of that as well, yeah. But it's one where if you're Mason Mount, where we're talking about balance in the squad, you'd feel very hard done by, because he's had a very good season for someone, like I said, with Tammy Abraham, who has literally just walked into the team from the Championship and has already been doing it at the highest levels. So it's really a catch-22. It does feel like you're just bringing in Kai Havertz because you can. And I feel like that 75 million could be invested elsewhere. But then again, like I said, he is a wonder kid. So it's something which you kind of do have to sit there and think about it. And, if he goes anywhere, he'll be going to Bayern, or he'll be going to, a Dortmund or something like that. So I don't know, but for 75 million pounds, it is something that you do have to think about, because you can still get some absolute donkeys for 75 million quid that just aren't up to scratch in comparison to other players. But again, it's 75 million with the hope that as a player he can develop, and he will develop, and you're not going to make a massive loss on him. And I know that contradicts what I was saying, where it's like, as a club, we can afford to take risks, but you can't afford to take 7.5 million risks from one window, as seen in the window where we signed Danny Drinkwater and some other absolutely useless players, to be fair. Actually, no, that's a bit harsh on Danny Drinkwater. When he played for us, he was all right, even though people say it was a redundant 40 million. But you know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like, left back, we can really afford to do it because that's a position which we need to strengthen there. Whereas, wingers, we're doing all right there. Mason Mount might end up moving into that position as a winger, but if we do get Kai Havertz and he comes inside, maybe. But it's one of those where it's like, look, like you've currently got in the squad, you'll have Pulisic, you'll have Ziyech, and it's other players where we do have the options out there. Got HUDSON-ODOI as well. So that's one of those where it's like, we can think about that. And people have already forgotten Ruben Loftus-Cheek has gone back as well. So if you're going through central midfield options right now, you've got Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Mateo Kovacic, Mason Mount, N'Golo Kante, Jorginho, Ross Barkley at 6 already, Billy Gilmore 7. I've run out of fingers, mate. You know what I mean? It's one where, I don't think it's a sign that we need to make, but he's definitely someone who could bring quality. But that's the catch-22. I honestly, I don't know. I think I've given you a very long form answer because that's what I tend to do. I do tend to ramble. Very sorry about that, but I have no clue. Absolutely no idea.
I think when I raised that question, and it was partly because of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and also a bit because of Mason Mount, I'm not denying Havertz' quality. I mean, you only have to watch Havertz for about 10 minutes in a game to realise the impact he has. He is that good. He can... Everything I've seen from him, I watched him the full game, Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Bayer Leverkusen, and he was incredible. And the thing that impressed me most was not only his influence, his movement, but his eye for a goal. And that is something that Chelsea have desperately lacked. The reason I asked, do we need him, is because can't we get those goals potentially from Loftus-Cheek, from Mason Mount? I think that's the thing for me, especially with Ruben coming back now. And if Ruben doesn't have another major injury and doesn't his injury concerns, which is a major concern, I'm sure it is a concern for at least, personally for him, but also for Chelsea, that if he keeps on getting these injuries, he's not going to turn out to be the player we hope he can be. But, Mason Mount, if he can double his numbers next season, I just wonder, because it's like, I think it once again comes to this thing of like the meeting of sort of two philosophies here. Are you someone that really invests in sort of the youth revolution and wants to see Chelsea's academy graduates finally get their moment and try and see this out, whilst adding quality to the first team squad in signings like Werner and Ziyech and others. Or do you want to go back to sort of the old Chelsea ways of sort of splashing the cash just on almost a ready-made thing? I know he's very, very young and he's got a long way to go, but it's like, I just wonder why can't Mason Mount be that? I think Mason Mount's received a lot of harsh criticism this season. And I think for a player who's played, 41, 42 games this season at his age, I think he's done incredibly well. And I think sometimes we're too eager to dismiss what we already have. And I think that sometimes can underrate the ability of a coach like Frank Lampard. Now, once again, as we've talked about with Werner and Ziyech and Chilwell, if that is Lampard's first choice, I can't really argue against Chelsea, really. If Frank sits down and goes, I need Kai Havertz, I need him. He's next season, he is essential for me for whatever our plan is. He's put out his team, his formation. This is what I'm going to do if I get Kai Havertz. This is how I'm going to use him. Fine, I'm happy with that, right? I mean, and I think he'd be an amazing signing, and he'd be a massive statement signing once again. But it's like, I almost think that, as you stated, central defenders, left back, if signing Kai Havertz means that Lampard doesn't get his first choice at left back, is that going to be a detriment? And are we going to be a bit lopsided as a team? I think that's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't want the Lamborghini attack and the Fiat 500 defence.
Well, this is Arsenal's problem, isn't it? This is the problem Arsenal have had for a number of years now.
Yeah, and that's it. It's one of those where you need to look at that. But also, I think maybe think in the central defender thing, even though we both agree it's a massive area where we need to have that imperious presence. Who's out there right now who is worth the money? And already Koulibaly, go get Koulibaly. No, I think he's 29 today. Yeah, why would you spend £90 million on a 29-year-old centre back? It's ridiculous. I mean, I thought I put it out as a tweet the other day. I don't know if you saw it. It was one where I was thinking, just imagine. Obviously, it's going to be one of those where it's not going to happen. It's a bit stupid. But then at the same time, you see other clubs are looking at it. Thiago Silva is 35. Yeah. But for 1 year in that dressing room as a stopgap. And I know people are saying don't have stopgaps. And I can already tell because, so my camera's there. Dan's over there. I could just look over at Dan. I could already see him rolling his eyes. It's one of those where it's like for 1 year, if you've got clubs like Arsenal who are having the problem with the centre defence and they want to improve it, like West Ham, maybe not. But the one that really made me think was Wolves are looking at Thiago Silva. I'm there going, maybe for a year, just to have that old head on shoulders, which can offer something, and then maybe in a year's time, that's when we see that 75 million. Okay, we found somebody who've identified a target who can make the difference in this team. Me and Yannick, when we were looking at that four-corner model and trying to decide, we settled on Lewis Dunk, but we don't think Lewis Dunk's probably the right man for the job.
When I heard about Lewis Dunk, I think that'd be a very smart signing. I mean, it's not a majorly long-term signing, but I think it's a smart signing. I think the problem for me with centre-backs is because I don't feel like it's, once again, a comparison to Liverpool's situation under Klopp, right? It was quite clear there were some poor defenders in his ranks that he had to get rid of. There were defenders who were going to let him down time and time again. The problem is with Chelsea is I look at all of our defenders and I can see the positives within all of them. I can see that they can have great games.
Yeah.
I think at times it's a bit demeaning to call them secondary defenders because I sometimes will watch Antonio Rudiger, who I would say is one of my favourite players in the Chelsea squad, so I'm biased towards him. But from the moment I first saw him play for Chelsea, I think he, on his best day, I think he absolutely sets the tone for what Chelsea can be defensively. I've seen him put in a lot of good, and I think my argument would be under Sarri and under Conte in his first season, I think he was Chelsea's best defender. I think fitness issues have been a problem for him, like they have been for a lot of Chelsea players this season. That I think has maybe hindered his form. And then you've got an Andreas Christensen who at times can look really composed, really intelligent, tactically aware, but then at times can be out-muscled physically. So you've got that problem. Kurt Zouma, I think, has probably been the most underrated Chelsea centre-back this season. I think he's probably, pound for pound, has probably been Chelsea's most consistent performing defender. And Fikayo Tomori, I think, is brilliant. I think actually I think Tomori and Zuma, I think, was the best centre back partnership we've had this season. Because it was it was one that, it was the one at Ajax, wasn't it, which was probably one of our best defensive performances of the season.
But this is the issue. We've got Zuma and we've got Tomori, but with the pair of them, we had the injury concerns. And as soon as you lose, because anyone that tells you a centre back partnership or a centre back is not key in a league winning squad needs to have a look at champions to be Liverpool, needs to have a look at City, needs to have a look at United, needs to have a look at Chelsea, needs to have a look at Arsenal.
Yeah.
And even though they weren't the best quality, look at the Leicester team as well. You had a consistent pairing or one consistent defender without fail every single week that was top quality and would drag a team. That is what Chelsea are lacking. And as soon as we lost that partnership, which, like you said, was the best we've had this season, you started leaking a lot more goals. But with that, we've still been leaking goals all year.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but the thing with all of those players you've mentioned, Christensen's still a lot of potential, still very young. Tomori is the same conversation. Rudiger, the fitness concerns worry me. He's getting on a bit as well. And when I say he's not getting on, he's in his prime, maybe just going over the hill. But that injury he had at the end of that Sarri season, as you can see, massively been detrimental to his performances this year. When he has come in, he hasn't hit the rhythm. And then on top of that as well, Zuma, he's good. He's good, but he's not, what he was.
I think the problem is, as you've stated, is there's not an obvious choice out there for me. I don't see, like the Van Dijk situation, I don't see one that I go, and that, that's probably me being simplistic in terms of, I'm sure there's people who, scout reports that probably tell me, there are better options out there, and Gabriel Magalhaes is really the only one that's ever come close to looking like it could happen, and he could be a very good defender, but he's still, in terms of his age bracket, he's still very, still very young, probably still, coming into the best years of his career. And that's the sort of the profile player you're looking at. But I get the sense Chelsea might skip signing a centre-back this summer because I think Frank maybe wants to really sort out Chelsea's issue of scoring goals, us being more clinical. And I know, as you've said, to win a title, you're going to need a centre-back. But that centre-back partnership, he may crack the code next season. He may have the code next season, and two of those four centre backs may be the consistent pairing. If our fitness issues improve, which they have to because they've been such an issue this season for Frank Lampard and team selection, if he can have a consistent back two, that may be the solution. If it's not, I think Chelsea either in January or next summer will then go back in, and hopefully there'll be an answer there. I think it's difficult at the moment for me, unlike other areas where you can go, that's an obvious, there's an obvious target. Timo Werner is an obvious choice. Ben Chilwell, Tagliafico, Hakim Ziyech, Jadon Sancho, there's better options in other positions, aren't there? So I think we're just gonna have to wait and see.